Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for students of counselling and psychotherapy. Here are your hosts, Rory Lees-Oakes and Ken Kelly.
Hello and welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast with me, Rory Lees-Oakes, and with me as ever, my fellow traveller in everything therapeutic, Mr. Ken Kelly. How are you doing, Ken?
I am doing exceptionally well. Rory, how are you today?
You find me, well, chipper.
You see, that's a cracker, that, isn't it? All the colloquialisms, is that how you say colloquialisms are coming out? Chipper and a cracker. Well, this is episode 93 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. What can you expect? We're going to be starting off today with a topic of dyslexia and counselling studies. In Practice Matters today, Rory is going to be speaking about immediacy as a skill. Can you give us a little taster, Rory?
Yeah, I'm going to be talking about the time when you're working with a client and something immediate comes up for you and you're able to share that in the here and now quite immediately. I'm going to be talking about what we need to think about before we use that particular skill. But it is a useful skill in building a real therapeutic relationship, which, as we know, is the arbiter of a good outcome for the client.
For sure. It's an advanced skill for sure. And I know that it is a skill that brings up a lot of confusion with many students. So I'm looking forward to that, Rory. And we're going to be ending episode 93 by speaking about personal development, but we're going to be linking that to the theory. That's going to be an interesting chat as well. So let's kick off with dyslexia and counselling study. What is it that you know about dyslexia, Rory?
Well, I know that people write to me on a regular basis saying that I can't spell. And I always look at that and think, I never knew that. I really never knew that.
So just to qualify that, writing to you saying that you, Rory, can't spell, not them saying they can't spell.
No.
Yes,
they write to me and they say, Rory, you can't spell. Your apostrophes are in the wrong place. Yeah. And I say, really? I never knew that. And I'm dyslexic, and I'm a proud dyslexic. And I'll tell you why I'm a proud dyslexic. Because there are some things that I know, no matter how hard I work, I cannot change. I cannot change the fact that if I write, it looks like a spider's died. One got into an inkwell and tried to crawl across a piece of paper. Sorry for the graphic imagery there. But the long and short of it is that I'm just not wired up for certain things. But one of the things I've realised through the years is that actually I'm wired up for other things, and it's about playing to strengths, not being too worried about weaknesses. So I know that we have a lot of people. We certainly see them on our Facebook page. And if you're new to the podcast and you don't know what our Facebook page is, type Counselling Tutor into Facebook. You'll find two pages. One's our business page, which we have for Counselling Tutor. And if you like what you hear, give us a 5-star review, because that really, really kind of cheers us up. But we also have a closed group where you can join. Over 20,000 people in there now, interested in the world of counselling and psychotherapy. Come on in, join the family, and share your experiences of training. And people have written in the Facebook group a lot about the fact that they have dyslexia and how it might impact on their studies. And, sometimes they find it pretty tough going. And my message is play to your strengths. Being dyslexic gives you, in my this dyslexic's view of the world, a lot of other things that maybe others don't. And certainly when I worked in the college, I used to get a lot of young people who did dyslexia tests, and they used to come in after the test holding a bit of paper and used to say, I'm dyslexic, a bit ashamed of it. I said, don't tell anybody you're dyslexic. And they said, why not? I said, because everybody will want to be. I said, don't be telling people. I said, everybody will want to be, because once you find out what your strengths are, then you can really fly.
It's an interesting topic. It's one that's dear to me. I am dyslexic and proud. If I could, I would wear a T-shirt, a Dyslexia Pride T-shirt. And the thing is, Rory, I wasn't always proud. In fact, I was ashamed. And that shame was driven into me, I believe, through my educators when I was at school, and I was always told that I wasn't trying hard enough and that I needed to work harder, and it just didn't stick. As like yourself, the spelling didn't stick, the punctuation just never stuck. That part of my brain is not able to recall and retain that information. But I, like yourself, Rory, have other parts of my brain that are able to do things that most other people are not able to do. I'm able to, I've got my own strengths in certain areas. But the story for me was, I think that message that I received, that external locus of evaluation, as it were, was very destroying for me, because I chose not to go into any further education because of that, because I was pretty much told it wasn't for me. It was not a direction for me. And it took me years. It was in my early 40s that I went into counselling training. And I went in with fear, and I went in with trepidation, because I knew I struggled with spelling and sentence structure and punctuation. And I recall, Rory, you being my tutor, walking in, writing on the board, on the whiteboard, writing something on the board, and you turned to the class and you said, I am dyslexic, so you may find that my spelling is incorrect, but you'll understand what the words are, and let's just get on with it. And it felt like permission. It felt like permission that an educator was standing in front of me, a lecturer, a senior lecturer at that, Rory, was standing in front of me and saying, I am dyslexic, something that I'd hidden and kept in a shameful part of my life for so many years. You're 100% right, Rory. There's not a day that goes past that there's not a comment on Facebook or an email that we get from fellow members of the Counselling Study Resource, or people that just listen to the podcast, saying, hey, I'm dyslexic. And I think that is to be embraced. Embrace your dyslexia, and there's so much support. It's a very different world now. This is something you want to be shouting about. It's something you definitely want to be sharing with your tutor. If you are dyslexic, tell your tutor, because measures can be put into place. There is help, there is support at a good learning institution.
Absolutely. Well, you would hope that would be the case. Just listening to you talking about the first time we met, Ken. I could tell you about classes that have been like a carry-on film, where I've put a word up and the students have been trying to correct it, and I've said, look, we're going to be here all day. I just can't get it. Yep. Why don't we just leave that word on the board? Right, we know what that word is. Let's just crack on. And I know that's super difficult if you're doing assignments, because we do live in a world where people love punctuation and grammar, and certainly educational establishments seem to be a trifle obsessed with it. And I've got to say, as a former educator in counselling, or maybe I'm still an educator in counselling, I'd like to think I am, that actually the clients that you see, they're not bothered. Yep. They're not bothered. They want to be heard and listened to and understood and validated in the world. And they're not really, I'm going to say a word that I really doubt broadcast. I'll say bothered about punctuation. Yes.
My head is desperately trying to fit in the word that you initially meant there, right, Rory. My imagination is running rife. It begins with
A and ends with D and has R-S-E-D in the middle.
Oh, you're giving too much away. I hear you. It's interesting. The world is open to, if you struggle with dyslexia, the world is open to you. If anybody had told me that I would eventually go on to author a best-selling book back in those days, I wouldn't have believed them. And if you'd have told that to my teachers at the time, they wouldn't have believed it either. But it is possible because of the support that is around. And it's about communication. That's what we do. As therapists, it's about communication. We are there listening and perceiving that whole person who is in front of us. And that is part of communication, how we perceive them and how we receive them, and then what we feed back. The question is, can you understand what is there? Is the communication there? Do you get it? Do you get the learning outcome from whatever you're reading on the site or whatever it may be? And that's what's important. As long as the communication is still understandable, I think that's the measure.
Absolutely, and and if you can spell, fantastic. That must be great, because you go through life never never having that bothering your kind of frame of reference or psyche. We're not having to go at people who are not dyslexic, but being neurodiverse, which is how I like to think of myself. I'm neurodiverse. Does give some advantages. I'm really thinking about this, Ken. I wonder if both of us could spell, and both of us weren't dyslexic. Would Counselling Tutor exist? Would we be sat recording this podcast? And I think possibly not.
I agree. I think it's thanks to dyslexia that I know you, Rory. I mean that moment, honestly, it's so difficult to explain. The moment that you wrote on the board and there was a spelling error and you turned around and owned it, it was like the walls fell down around me. It was incredibly empowering, and I think there's too little of that in our world, that people are more likely to point fingers and criticize rather than to embrace that neurodiversity at all of its levels. It's an absolutely fascinating topic. It's absolutely great. We are working at this moment on providing learning resources on dyslexia. Specifically, a little course on dyslexia that's in the pipeline at the moment. And also, if you are a member of the Counselling Study Resource, which is our paid-for part of Counselling Tutor, we offer a lot of stuff free, including this podcast. This is free, counsellingtutor.com. All the articles and resources on there are free. But we do offer a paid-for resource. And within that paid-for resource, we're very mindful to put out blended learning. There is audio files, there are video files, there are infographics, there are what do you call them, Venn diagrams, as well as written, because we don't all consume information the same way. We spoke just last week about diversity, and it's a form of diversity, and it is to be embraced.
Yeah, I think so. Should we get ourselves a couple of T-shirts, Ken?
Yes.
The only thing is can you spell dyslexia?
I can't. Every single time I try, honestly, single time I type dyslexic into an email or into something referencing it, I always spell it wrong. Well, that is dyslexia and counselling studies. We're moving on to something that kind of links in a way, because we're speaking about immediacy. Immediacy is a skill. It's a skill in counselling. It's an advanced skill, Rory, and it's a skill that is often misunderstood.
It is. People think that immediacy, or some people think that immediacy is just saying whatever comes to your mind. And we know that we have lots of things kind of rattling around in our minds, and we don't want to go out unaudited, But what I would say is that I'm going to be talking about the importance of immediacy, and I'm going to be giving some real concrete examples of how being immediate in the therapy room, or maybe when you're practicing your skills at college or your learning provider, how it can actually foster and build and strengthen and deepen a relationship. And I think it's really useful. And I've got, of course, a super duper handout, Ken.
Practice Matters with Rory after this short message.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Students often ask, what are implicit and explicit patterns of relating? This question comes up a lot in CPCAB courses as part of the criteria. The answer to this question lies in one particular counselling skill, immediacy, which is best summed up by author Roy E. Barnes in his book Core Competencies of Relational Psychoanalysis as courageous speech and disciplined spontaneity. However, you don't have to be on a CPCAB course or be a practicing psychoanalyst to pick up on implicit and explicit patterns of relating. Being thoughtfully spontaneous when you feel there's something going on between you and the client can be useful to get past blockages and deepen the relationship. Immediacy is the counsellor's ability to thoughtfully share what is going on for them at any moment in time during therapy. And it could be sharing how you as a counsellor is feeling, sharing your instinct of what the client may be feeling or experiencing, and inviting the client to explore what is going on between you. So let's look at examples of immediacy when working with implicit patterns of relating. A female client says, "Sometimes I feel it is really hard to share what's going on for me. I feel so ashamed." The male counsellor says, "How does it feel talking to a man about what's going on for you?" The female client responds, "It's hard because men have treated me badly." The male counsellor, using immediacy, says, "I'm not one of those men." And in this example, we can see how immediacy is used to kind of break that deadlock between the female client and the male therapist, and to bring into awareness and into the room this universal truth that she's struggling with a male therapist, maybe because of her experiences of men. And the male counsellor courageously and thoughtfully uses immediacy to bring that into the therapy room, and also to make it clear that he is not one of those men that she's met in her life previously. Very useful. In the next example, we're going to use an example of what may happen to a female client working with a male client, and her ability to share her instincts. The male client says, "I feel really angry today. My female boss has told me to rewrite a report because I had not included the sales figures. I left the office and went to fill up my car at the petrol station. The female cashier said I could not use my debit card to pay as it had expired. I had to pay cash. Then on the way here, I was stopped for speeding by a female police officer." And again, the female counsellor, using that skill of courageous speech and disciplined spontaneity, which is the hallmark of immediacy, says to the client, "I hear you're angry. I wonder if it's women or women in authority you find difficulty with." Because, as you can say, he's talked a lot about women in that interaction, and it may be that is the crux of the difficulties he's having. In both these interactions, the counsellor shares thoughtfully an immediate feeling with the client in the service of both congruence and to bring into awareness that which is unsaid or even hidden. In terms of my own practice, I find this skill can be very, very useful to move past clients' own stuckness, and it also deepens the relationship and encourages an open and honest dialogue.
Thank you as always, Rory. Rory's got a super duper handout on the skill of immediacy. To get that, you just go to our mother website. It's where it all kicks off, it all happens. It is counsellingtutor.com. That's 2 L's in counselling because we're based in the UK spelling. Counsellingtutor.com. Click on the podcast tab, which you'll find in the top menu, and navigate to episode 93. That's today's episode. Everything we've discussed is there in the show notes, a little précis of today's episode, along with any links that have come up from this episode, or any links that we kind of think of after the fact. We add to that page as well, and you can download Rory's super duper handout on the skill of immediacy from within that page. If, of course, you are already a member of our paid for resource, that's the Counselling Study resource, well, that handout has already been added to your handouts vault. Just log in and it is there for you. So moving away from a skill of immediacy onto a topic that comes up again and again, certainly within our Facebook group, and that is personal development. Personal development is very much a part of training to be a counsellor, a therapist, a psychotherapist, but we're going to be linking this to theory today, Rory.
Yes, I mean, a lot of assignments do ask for linking your personal development to theory, and I'd like to tell you a little funny. I think it's a funny story, Ken. Before I left college, I was clearing some documents out, and I came across a worksheet with some writing on, and I looked at it and I thought, wonder who's written this? You know, because through the years as a tutor, you get hundreds of resources and bits of information, and it was someone writing, and they were being asked to do it was an REBT module, rational emotive behavioral therapy, and they were being asked to consider irrational thinking and how they could change the behavior. And someone had written on a piece of paper, I'm not very academic, and then the next part said, what could you do to be more academic? And it said, academic people tend to read books and stick with the studies and stick with it. And then it said, what would the outcome be if you did that, and the outcome someone had written, then I'd become more academic and more able and more understanding of it. And I thought, that's very astute. I wonder who wrote that. And I realised it was me. and that it was real. And I'd written it, of course, for my own personal development assignment. But there's so much theory, isn't there, Ken, that we can draw on when we're thinking about personal development, certainly in the person-centered world.
Yes. Yeah, my favourite go-to on personal development is Cole Rogers' 7 stages of process, where he kind of outlines how a client may move through certain stages of process from a place of rigidity to a place of being more fluid. And if you want to refer to the 7 stages of process, we have a really good article. It's 100% free, where the 7 stages of process are outlined. And to find that, you just go to counsellingtutor.com. There's a big search box on the front page of counsellingtutor.com. It's like a search engine for counselling theory and skills and practice-related topics. Just pop in there, stages of process or 7 stages of process, and that article will come up. And of course, we'll put a link to that in today's show notes as well, so that you can link through to that. So the definition refers to the 7 stages of process of one model of stages, the marked phases which a client or people attempting to self-change pass through. Rogers, 1961. Stages of process runs from 1, remoteness from experiencing, to 7, experiencing effective choices of new ways of being. I love that, new ways of being.
Absolutely, and certainly get on that if you're writing a personal development assignment. Introjected values and conditions of worth. I think that those who study in the person-centered world would recognise those terms, and that's another useful topic to consider. How have you changed through the arc of your studies? Are you more trusting of your internal locus of evaluation than other people's conditions of worth? That's something to talk about, and you could give some examples. Always useful, and it's always a criteria hitter. You can't go wrong with that, because if you use that theory and give a real concrete example, almost certainly you're going to get past that piece of criteria.
It's really interesting, specifically linking it to person-centered theory as you are there, Rory, and speaking about those introjected values, those conditions of worth. And, just to go back to the top of this podcast, where we were speaking about dyslexia, and I shared that when I was at school, I really struggled, and I was given those introjected values by my educators, saying it's not good enough, you're not good enough. Conditions of worth, you are better if you can spell better, conditions of worth, and I adopted them. And self-development is about challenging the truths that we hold. And that day in that lecture, Rory, when you wrote on the board and turned around and said, I am dyslexic, it was like those walls came tumbling down. It was a moment of personal development for me. I was able to take something that I felt shame over and go, hold on a minute, I don't need to feel this shame. All of those introjected values, those conditions of worth fell away, and I was able to embrace myself and who I actually am. Not change it, just embrace it. And that is a massive personal development. Personal development is not about changing. Often it is about accepting.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of growth within counselling studies. Transactional analysis is a classic one, with parents, the adult, and the child, and the life script. I love the life script. I can remember many years ago teaching a level 2 class where someone said, "Oh, I'm not buying into this life script business. I've always done what I wanted, and there's no script written for me. I'm not writing the script." And I said,
faithfully referring to that script, Rory.
Yeah, and I said to that person, I said, when you were a child, what did your parents say to you a lot? And he said, "I never do as I'm told." And there was just this silence in the room, and her eyes were the size of plates, and she went, "And I still don't now, do I?" And I went, "No." She said, "That's a life script, isn't it?" And I went, "Yes."
That's it. They're invisible. They're invisible, aren't they, life scripts? They're invisible as we act them out and we replay those scripts. And that's the thing about personal development, is often unseen. A great exercise is Johari's window. Again, go to counsellingtutor.com, put that into the search bar. There's a great article on Johari's window on that exercise. And Johari's window kind of indicates that there are certain things that are unseen to us and may be seen by others. There are certain things that are unseen to us, unseen by others. But as we move through our life, as we examine self, that we kind of the aim, I guess, is for more and more to fall within our own vision, that we can see it all into the clear pane. Go and have a look at that. Johari's window, counsellingtutor.com.
Absolutely. And part of Johari's window, of course, is unseen by self and unseen by others, things you don't know and things you don't know yourself. And that is fostered by an unconditional attitude on behalf of helpers, and also an encouragement, I would say, to get people to explore the world, because sometimes we find who we want to be quite by accident, quite serendipity, isn't it? That's what Mark's saying. I can't spell it.
Nobody can, Rory. That one is impossible.
Serendipity, just a marvelous experience that hides around every corner.
Yeah, I'm reminded of Carl Rogers' quote. The curious paradox is that only when I truly accept myself for who I am do I have the ability to change. And that is part of self-development, examining self. You examine self. And it's not about examining self so that we can change. So often we'll hear, oh, I'm doing this, and what I need to do is this, and I've got to get this, and I've got to start being like this, and I've got to stop being like this. That's not self-development. It's about accepting that that's who we are, accepting our patterns, accepting our scripts. And through that acceptance, if we look to the theory of Carl Rogers, then there is a chance for change.
Absolutely. So I hope you've enjoyed this little kind of ramble into my self and Ken's awareness. Yeah. It's quite a personal thing, because we started off the podcast by talking about dyslexia, something that affects both me and Ken, and then I went on to discuss immediacy, which I think is a really useful skill. Certainly, if you feel that there's something you need to say, be immediate and say it. And then just linking all of that into the theories that we learn, because counselling is as much about how we know ourselves than how we work with others. I think you have to know yourself, and that's what personal development's about. So on that kind of existential bombshell, stay grounded and stay safe.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode on our website at www.counsellingtutor.com.